one Sheriff of Nottingham figure spanned over 1, 2, 3, 4 different lines. What's up, everyone? I've got a little fun video here. We are going to get into the epic and genius, probably a little ridiculous, reuse of Kenner toys. All right, guys. So in front of me, I've got a bunch of toys, as usual. All these toys, well, I should say, yeah, all these toys came from one company. That company is a company that we grew up on, and that is Kenner. Kenner produced some of our most favorite toys over the years, 80s, 90s, until they got bought out. But Kenner did, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Superpowers, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Now, the reason we're talking about Kenner today is because Kenner did something that was a little genius, and it was something that isn't really done today in the toy industry. Kenner is to me, was one of the best action figure companies through the 80s and 90s. But they also cut their fair share of corners. Back then, when you were crunched for time, the toy industry was different then. You were sculpting out of Castelline and wax, so it wasn't digital. Things weren't fast. You were drawing on paper, not Cintiqs. I think cutting corners was a big part of the way toys were produced. And in this video today, we're going to talk about a bunch of times Kenner really cut corners and reused products over the years. And again, this is not a knock on Kenner. I think it was a genius way of doing things because, me being in the toy industry, I know how things are, things need to be done fast here and there. So every now and then you got to do stuff like this. But it just goes to show that back in the 80s and 90s, the Wild West of toy production was a crazy time. And you definitely can't do it today. But maybe at the end, I'm going to show you something where maybe some reuse was done on a modern day toy. Let's get into Kenner's reuse. Now, let's see where it started. So it started as far back as, I believe, 1980, 81. Let's see what the date is on this. 78. Yeah, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Kenner was doing Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, and they ended up being almost the same figures as the Indiana Jones line. Now, this is the Arabian horse from the Indiana Jones line, which was used in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The way the figures were constructed for Indiana Jones were the same constructions as Butch Cassidy, same trigger, spring-loaded trigger hand, but they were, Indiana Jones was new molds, new sculpts. They just used the same kind of formula. The Arabian horse was kind of the first time I ever knew that they were reusing, and this was the same exact horse and saddle that they used for the Butch Cassidy line that they used as the Arabian horse for Indiana Jones. So, going all the way back to late 70s, early 80s, we got our first indication of some reuse. Now, I know I'm probably going to miss a bunch of things, so don't, I know you guys are going to be in the comments saying, oh, you missed this, oh, you missed that. I'm just pulling a few examples. So, just to show you that, Kenner did it more than any other toy line that I could find examples of. But again, if I missed something, maybe throw it in the comments. But I know there's definitely going to be stuff that I missed. Now, the most prevalent time that reuse was done was using superpowers for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Now, everyone kind of knows this. It's toy, toy history here. I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of insight from a manufacturer's point of view. So, when it came time for Kenner to do Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I've watched tons of videos on this line. I love this line. Growing up, I had every single one. I had the Sherwood Forest, which I don't have the Sherwood Forest here, but I'll get it out of the way. The Sherwood Forest was a reuse of the Ewok Village, except you had some added tree parts, which I think made Sherwood Forest much better. Even though you had these little cubby holes. Now, me as a kid, I didn't know that the Ewok Village existed. So I got the Sherwood Forest. I'm like, man, Robin Hood would really have to duck down to get into, the little huts on the trees. Well, that's because they were made for Ewoks. But with the figures itself, they must have been hard up on time to produce the Robin Hood stuff. We'll start with Robin Hood because he's the titular character. So Robin Hood obviously has bow and arrow, quiver, hand with the knocking finger. So it was quite smart of Kenner to say, well, if we got a guy that shoots a bow and arrow, why not use some parts from a guy who shoots a bow and arrow? And this is Green Arrow from the Superpowers line. Now, we'll just get down to the figure itself. Robin basically uses almost the entire body of Green Arrow except for his legs. Same arm, like the detail on the straps on his arm, same knocking hand. Now, under his soft goods, you can see here, he's got a G on his belt. That G is the same G that's on Green Arrow's belt. So they didn't even remove that. But they used this body, and it was very smart of them, to use this Green Arrow body. Also, the same bow, same way the string attaches. However, the interesting thing is for this Robin, they use these really big, long plastic arrows with a big giant tip, whereas Green Arrow had these little tiny, easily lost arrows. And the arrow clipped into like a little C-clip right here on the bow. Now that little C-clip is not on the Robin bow. Now me as a manufacturer, it's like, that could have been done one of two ways. They could have altered the tool to fill in that area of the C-clip there. But I'm trying to look where the gate marks are on the bow, and they are the same gate marks. Now, gate marks are where basically the plastic extrudes in to the mold. They're the same on the two bows. So to me, they must have just altered the tool because, but then again, this one has a hole where the arrow goes through. This one has the C-clip. So either they altered the tool or they duplicated it in some way, but there was definitely some change there. Now, they saved some time by not having to make a new bow from scratch. They probably said to the factory, hey, do this, don't make it like this, and just tweak these little things. Because the other thing about the Robin Hood line is they're basically 5 POA. They have no elbow or knee articulation. But Superpowers has knee articulation. And as we get through, you'll start to see where they reuse some legs from Superpowers in Robin Hood, but it doesn't have the knee articulation anymore. Now, this could just be, again, them saving time on not having to sculpt new parts and just telling the factory, use this part, but fuse up the knee. So that's where that comes in, and so corners cut, I look at it as like, nowadays with digital and everything like that, if you're going to duplicate a tool, to me, it's like, you might as well just tool something new. So like when I was at Hasbro, you guys, Marvel Legends fans, you all know the Bucky Cap body. That body was used forever on hundreds of different figures. They duplicated that tool. So there was more than one mold of that Bucky Cap body because they had to use it so many times. For me, when I got to the point in my toy career where I was told, hey, we're gonna have to duplicate this tool, I was like, well, do I have time to just make a whole new body? Because if you're just going to cut the steel anyway, you might as well let me do something fresh and new. So that's where like you kind of like get in. If they're like, no, there's not enough time, I'm like, well, what can I do to change it? So for those of you who have that Bucky Cap body, just remember, it's not the same mold. That could be from one of many different molds that body was used for.
Action Force is bringing the fight to cancer. In honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Valaverse has enlisted the Steel Brigade to lead this fight. This new female Steel Brigade action figure, clad in pink with the iconic breast cancer ribbon adorned on her vest, is available on Valaverse.com now. Valaverse has teamed up with the Gloria Gemma Breast Cancer Resource Foundation in Rhode Island for this special item. Proceeds from the Steel Brigade action figure will be shared with the Gloria Gemma Foundation. Every Steel Brigade you purchase will help with this great cause. You too can join the Action Force for this fight. Go get your Steel Brigade trooper now and help bring the fight to cancer. It's time for action.
Guys, if you haven't seen Robin Hood Prince Thieves, movie should have won an Oscar. It's so good. So Will Scarlet uses multiple different figures parts. He uses the torso and arms of Robin and the legs of Desaad. So you can see like Will Scarlet's got this chopping hand and a sea grip hand. Robin with a chopping hand and a sea grip hand. And they even like, he even has like the cuffs for his, for his gloves here. They just changed nothing. Now the R is tampo printed, but it's like you could see he's got the scales on the crotch from his his scale underwear here. So they didn't change any of that for Will Scarlet. But then the legs don't have the scaling, but the legs are the same as Desaad's, where it has all these straps and buttons and stuff on it. But again, see how Desaad has knee articulation, whereas Will Scarlet does not. So they just duplicated that and fused it. So very, very, interesting that they did it that way. So it's like, yeah, we're going to save money on sculpting, but yeah, we'll cut corners on the articulation. So there's Will Scarlet with Desaad and Robin. One of my next favorites is, now this was a smart one because, Little John, he was a big dude, big muscular guy. Well, that was easy because Hawkman's a big muscular guy. And they just used the Hawkman torso and arms for Little John. Now you can see Hawkman, he's got the straps with the emblem on the front. And if you open Little John's shirt, he's got the straps with the emblem on there too. So there's, Hawkman, Little John. Now they did, they sculpted new heads and they did some soft goods, which, again, the Robin Hood line was a great line. It didn't do well, I guess because it really wasn't a kid's movie. But the line was impressive. Like, it just looked great. It's like Robin's soft goods and stuff. Like, it was a well-done line. The one figure that really wasn't done well, which I was a little bummed about, Sheriff of Nottingham. Done by the great Alan Rickman. He was probably the best part of the movie. Now, all the characters got new heads and stuff. Robin got an actor likeness. However, the Sheriff of Nottingham, which I didn't grab the figure, is actually the body, the torso and the legs of Lex Luthor from Superpowers. So it's that armored Lex Luthor. But the head is from a RoboCop figure. This head was used on a RoboCop figure. The guy had white hair. Now, the interesting thing about that is the gun that came with the T-1000 years later, this gun right here, came with the same RoboCop figure as this head. So you could see where Kenner started to just go all out with, hey, let's just, we need a gun for T-1000? Sure, grab that RoboCop gun. But it didn't stop there with the Sheriff figure. So the Sheriff figure is pretty much all reuse, even down to his medallion, this little gold medallion that everyone lost. That gold medallion ended up being used on the animated series Two-Face. So, it's one that everyone lost there as well. But again, it's like, it's kind of crazy. It's like, we got a medal. It's just like, but in the show, like they show him with the good and evil badge here, but he didn't have that in the animated series, at least not that I remembered. I just remember the figure coming with this gold medallion. And it's like, I got this figure and I was like, wait, Sheriff of Nottingham has that too. So there you got to see like one Sheriff of Nottingham figure spanned over 1, 2, 3, 4 different lines. RoboCop, Terminator, Superpowers, Batman the Animated Series. Pretty nuts. So there's that guy. Last up is kind of a funny one. This is where they really like dug into the well a little bit. They needed to do Friar Tuck. And they said, all right, well, we need kind of a pudgy dude. Who do we have that's pudgy with sandals on? I know, we got a Gamorrean guard. So they use the Gamorrean guard and, you lift up his skirt. Sorry, bud, I'm, don't be mad at me here. It's same furry skirt and everything like that. They toned down some of the fur a little bit on here because it isn't piled as high. But overall, it's the same figure, which is interesting because they had to alter the tool a little bit for the fur because it doesn't sit as high. But it's like everything else is the same. So why would they make these changes and stuff like that? Just use the exact tool if you're going to do that. And also like his height. Like he's really little, but then it's like Friar Tuck's really little compared to Robin. Now in the movie, it's like Friar Tuck's the same size as Robin Hood, but now you got this really little guy. So it was really kind of funny that they chose a Star Wars 3 3/4 inch figure when the rest of the time they were using these 5-inch figures for reuse. But hey man, gonna do what you gotta do to get toys done. So there are some really good examples of Kenner's reuse. Kenner, I applaud you for doing what you guys did. It's, you know, you had to do what you had to do to get things done. But the fact is that over years, you know, you got to think like Superpowers came out in what, 84 and 85 and 86. You know, Robin Hood came out in what, 90 or 91. Then Terminator was like 92 with these figures. So it was like they kept spanning. And then this animated series figure was, where's the date? No date. Oh, 1992. So it was like, you know, it's just like, it's just funny. So like 90 to 92, like years later, but you're still reusing parts. But again, this is kind of the nature of it. Now, this doesn't really happen much. Now, you could say, well, Marvel Legends reuse. Yes, that's within its own line. But I'm saying like line to line. Because normally it's like, you know, when an IP line, they're normally protected to the point where you can't use, like, you couldn't use Marvel parts for, say, a G.I. Joe line. However, you could use G.I. Joe parts for a Marvel line. Now, I'm going to show you a real quick example of an item I worked on where I did some reuse.
It's time for action. Action Force Series 5, the all-new premium action figure line from Valaverse is here. The Action Force team is introducing some new recruits with Atlas, Senshi, and Sidewinder. Every good unit starts with a great leader. Now we finally get to see who's barking all the orders at the Action Force team. Colonel Siege, the leader of Action Force, is also part of Series 5. All of these new heavy hitters will be needed on the Action Force team because there's a new threat on the horizon. Built inside the secret walls of Crimson Shadow Technologies, a new android security force is born. The Praetorians have now been unleashed. Of course, it wouldn't be a new Action Force series without new basic troopers, gear packs, and a new arsenal of weapons. Head over to Valaverse.com right now to get your pre-order in for Action Force Series 5, arriving later this year. Action Force Series 5 by Valaverse.
When I first started at Hasbro, I was on the exclusives team, and I was doing this exclusive Hall of Armor pack. I believe this was an Amazon exclusive, and it was a pack of 6 4-inch figures, but we wanted to highlight all Iron Man's armors. You know, because the new Iron Man 3 was coming out, but, you know, we needed a Tony Stark figure. I thought it was great to have a Tony Stark figure, but the only thing I was able to tool was his head. That was the only new tooling I got. So I said, well, I got an idea. I was like, what factory are these parts at? My engineer told me. Turns out they were at the same factory that produced the G.I. Joe 4-inch figures at the time, like, you know, Pursuit of Cobra, 30th anniversary. Me being a huge G.I. Joe fan, I knew the G.I. Joe parts library like in and out. So I ended up using a whole torso, arms, legs. All of these parts were G.I. Joe parts that I used for this Tony Stark figure. And then we just tooled a new Robert Downey Jr. head. So here's an example where I got to use some reuse that worked actually very well, because this set sold well because of the Tony Stark figure, because these were all reissued figures, but everyone wanted that Tony Stark figure. And it was kind of cool that I got to use some G.I. Joe parts in a Marvel figure. So there's my example of reuse. Again, it's not something that can happen all the time. I know that when I was on Marvel, we had ideas to do you know, like Marvel pets for like a Comic-Con exclusive. That was like, we would always come up with a ton of concepts for Comic-Con and then narrow it down. And I got to do some of them in the collector's vault, you know, Moon Boy, Cosmo. But my original idea was to do almost like a dog food bag with an open window in the front. And it had a bunch of the Marvel pets. And I wanted to do Devil Dinosaur. And for those who don't know Devil Dinosaur, I think he's this big red T-Rex. And I said, oh, well, the Hasbro had the Jurassic Park license at the time. I was like, can we use the T-Rex mold? But someone told me that while a T-Rex you can't copyright a T-Rex. However, Jurassic Park has a specific look to their T-Rex, and they have copyrighted their specific look of their T-Rex. So you can't use the way theirs looks, which is kind of weird that you can copyright a dinosaur. Kind of weird. We were told don't even go down that road. So that was kind of a bummer because I thought it would have been cool to have done the Marvel pets in the dog food bag. But at least I got that Iron Man set, and the Kenner way lives on. So that's all I got for some reuse and toys. Hope you guys dug this one. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing to the channel because we have tons of great content coming out where I talk about other toy lines, and we have tons down the road that we're going to be coming out with. It's always fun to really talk about these lines. Me as a collector and also me as a toy manufacturer, it's always great to give insight from two different sides about these kind of things. So hopefully you guys dug my perspective on the Kenner reuse. This was a fun video, and I hope you guys think so too.